David Williams, an archivist by profession, visits a house with his wife, Alice. Alice likes the house, so they both buy it. They spent some years living in this house. They also have a 4-year-old son, Billy Williams. Alice's attitude toward David is not as enthusiastic as it used to be, and this worries David. He tries his best to keep Alice happy. While taking Billy to school, they pass by a nearby canal. Billy tells David that his friend told him that the public washroom there is haunted. David tells Billy there's nothing there and takes him to school. At night, Alice and David are going to a party, so they hire Sophie to look after Billy. While Alice is talking to her client, Alex, at the party, David finds Alex's body language suspicious. Meanwhile, Alice also approaches David and asks him to dance with her. They both dance, during which she expresses her love for him. David is sitting in his office, thinking about Alice and Alex, when Claire approaches him and tells him that he has to work on some movies that were left unfinished. The movie David plays is based on clips from a gruesome crime scene in 1902. The most shocking thing is that the murders took place in the same house where David is still living. In the night, David has a terrible dream, in which he is seeing the scene of the same murder as how the husband eliminated his wife, and the slaughterer also appears in front of him, which wakes him up. The next day, he goes to work and asks Alice to be home on time, to which she replies that she will try. After dropping Billy off at school, David follows Alice, and Alice is with Alex all the while. At night, when Alice is entering the house with Alex, David calls out to her, but Alice does not hear. Meanwhile, David gets a call from Billy saying that he forgot to pick him up from school. David picks Billy up from school, and they get home. David goes to Alex's house after Billy has gone to sleep. He enters, where he sees the two in bed together. When he sees all this, he is taken aback. On his return, his physical condition deteriorates, and he goes to the public washroom in front of the canal. David sees the same slaughterer in the washroom. Someone whispers in his ear that the master wants his wife. David escapes, terrified but unable to walk properly due to weakness. He sees a man outside eliminating Alice, and Alice tries to stop him. David wants to go help her, but he falls unconscious. When David regains consciousness, he goes straight home and looks for Alice, but she is not home. David calls her but receives no answer. He goes to the police to file her missing report, and the police now start looking for Alice. David also spends the day searching for Alice with McNamara. When he comes home that night, Sophie has put Billy to sleep. After Sophie leaves, David sits down, and after a while he hears someone walking upstairs. He thinks of something and runs upstairs. Billy is sitting scared on the bed in his room, and Billy says that he misses Alice. Meanwhile, David sees a reflection in the mirror, and when he turns to look at the corner, there is no one there. His search for Alice continues from the canal the next morning. David is sitting in his car with McNamara. McNamara tells him that Alex visited him the other day. He revealed that he was Alice's lover, and that Alice was going to leave David soon. McNamara says that in cases like this, the husband is usually the suspect, and in the end, the husband turns out to be the culprit. When David sees the sign of the police standing on the bridge, he goes there. Alice's body is recovered from the canal. David freaks out and wants to get to her. The police stop him with difficulty. At the hospital, David is brought in to identify the body, and is officially asked if it is his wife. The doctor informs him that Alice died of drowning. Maybe she accidentally fell into the canal. David also learned that Alice was pregnant. Alice's mother comes to the funeral. She wants to take Billy with her, but David refuses. After the guests leave, David can't stand it anymore and shares with Claire that he already knew Alice had a boyfriend. He saw them together the night Alice disappeared, but he did nothing and returned. On the way, he went to a public bath. He further tells her that he also saw a man looking at him from the top of the cubicle wall. When he came out, he saw the man holding Alice by the throat before he passed out. The man was hitting Alice, but David couldn't do anything. David is convinced that everything he saw was real. If he had told all this to the police, they would never have believed him. Instead, they would have considered him a criminal. Now he wants to find Alice's killer anyway. David starts his investigation the next day. He goes to the public bathroom and takes pictures. After that, he again collects information from the film, which was about the tragic murder in 1902. David cuts out news clippings from the newspaper that relate to the house and the canal. These newspaper clippings are also of executions. He puts all these clippings on a wall in his room. He collects all of the crime scenes, and Claire explains to him that he is in shock and should rest. But David is sure that he will get something soon. When he comes home, Sophie has decorated a Christmas tree with Billy. Billy is overjoyed, and David sits in his room and tries to make a point with the pictures, but fails and throws all the pictures in anger. Sophie stands there and is upset to see this. She had come to ask David if she could decorate the rest of the house, and he gives her permission. He uses an old camera to film different parts of his house, and when he cleans it, he sees a reflection of the same person in his house. He hears voices from behind his room's wall. To confirm this, he calls Sophie into his room and asks her to listen for voices coming from behind the wall. But Sophie hears no such sound, and David still insists that someone is whispering. Billy arrives, and Sophie takes him to sleep. David breaks through the wall but finds nothing there. He sees someone going towards the back door, so he goes there. Outside, he sees someone standing at the window. Suddenly, from inside the house, he hears Sophie screaming. He runs in. Sophie and Billy are both completely fine. David realizes that it might be dangerous for them to stay here. That is why he sends them both to the hotel and stays at home himself. David shows Claire the footage he made at his house. He tells her that there is a ghost in his house, and it is the ghost that killed Alice. Claire doesn't believe him. David tells her that she thinks he might be having a nervous breakdown, but Claire explains to him that he is just too tired and needs some rest. The next day, David is on a video call with Billy. David sees a shadow in Billy's room. He asks Billy about Sophie, and he tells him that she is taking a shower. David gets so afraid that he asks Billy to turn the laptop around and show the room. When Billy does this, no one is in the room. Then suddenly, a man approaches the laptop from behind Billy. Seeing all this, David rushes to the hotel, but no one is there. He brings both of them back home. Sophie gets very frightened with all this. She tells David that she wants to quit the job and go back home. David tells her that he can't guarantee Sophie's safety, so she should leave, but just stay with Billy tonight. She can quit her job tomorrow. Sophie is sleeping when she senses someone's presence there. Suddenly, someone attacks her, and hearing her screams, David rushes and drags her away. He takes Sophie and Billy and locks them in the storeroom. Sophie screams in fear and asks David to open the door. After a while, David opens the door. He went to search the house, but no one was there. David tells her they should be together. He asks Sophie if she saw anyone upstairs, but she doesn't answer. Sophie wants to take Billy with her, but David keeps him to himself. Sophie goes upstairs and sleeps. The next day, David asks Billy if he has seen a stranger in the house, to which Billy says no. David explains to him that if he sees any strangers in the house, he must inform him. David is taking Billy to school when he sees a woman in the bushes while walking through the canal. He asks Billy if he sees a woman, and Billy says he doesn't see anyone there. Instead of taking Billy to school, David brings his old camera to the canal and films the woman. David goes to Claire and gives her the reel to develop. He pleads with her to do it today. Claire says that she will try to finish it as soon as possible, and that she will come to deliver the reel herself. David spreads flour on the floor of the house so that even if someone is home, he can trace it. When David's eyes open at night, he sees the same assassinator, covered in blood, who is tying up a corpse, and suddenly the corpse screams. David wakes up scared. The next morning, McNamara takes David with him and tells him that they found a hammer in the canal with his fingerprints on it and that it belongs to Alex. David tells him that a man eliminated his entire family in the house where he lives and that the man is a ghost. But McNamara doesn't believe him, and a case is filed against David. His lawyer argues that David is grieving over the loss of his wife, which is why he is saying such things. He wants to get David checked by a psychiatrist, but he refuses. The police are now keeping an eye on him all the time. At night, David starts hearing voices again from the wall he has already broken. He finds some traces of satanic rituals behind the wall, including some pictures and some signs on papers. When David comes out of his room at the sound of a knock, he sees footprints on the spread of flour leading to the sewer main hole behind the house. David enters it. It leads to the manhole canal. He finds the body of a newborn baby wrapped in paper. He sees a hand coming out of the water, and he runs away in fear. Claire has cleaned up the reel and brought it to David's house. David asks her to watch the movie with him, because he is afraid to watch it alone. As David sets up the projector, Claire tells him that he called her last night. He was crying and wanted to tell her about Alice, but David replies that he didn't call her. She makes him sit next to her and asks if he has done anything to Alice. He can tell her or tell the police, and she will help him in any way she can. But David replies that in this house, small children were sacrificed in this room, because the blood of children is pure and powerful, and their bodies were thrown into the canal through the main hole. Claire begins to cry after hearing all of this. She kisses him, but David has no effect. He sits motionless. He tells Claire that she will understand after watching this film. Claire can't see anything in the film, but suddenly a shadow appears, slowly approaching. The shadow comes out of the wall and pulls Claire into the hole, but David can't do anything. David runs out of the house with Billy, but is surrounded by the police, who have heard Claire's screams. David runs back inside the house with Billy and dives into the main hole in the back with him. Running into the main hole, he remembers everything that happened to him. Alice was eliminated by him. She pleaded with him, but David did not listen to her and finished her by drowning her in a canal. He was the one who attacked Sophie and did away with Claire. When Claire did not understand, he strangled her. He remembers all this now, but it is also true that David would not have done all this. There, he finds Alice covered in blood and mud. She gives birth to a baby in front of David, which causes David to scream and run away. Alice grabs her baby and runs after him. David runs to the canal, carrying Billy. He jumps into the water with Billy. Alice catches David in the water, and David releases Billy. The police rescue Billy, but David drowns. The next day, Billy's grandmother comes to take him with her. She wants to sell David's house as soon as possible. Billy tells his grandmother that he forgot his dinosaur book in his room. His grandmother tells him to bring back his book without delay. He goes to his room and picks up the book, when David calls out to him through the crack in the wall. Billy walks up to the wall, and David tells him he's over there with his mom. If he wants to be with them, then he has to do as he says. Billy comes and sits in the car with his grandmother. When the car reaches the main road, Billy opens his seatbelt and jumps out of the moving car. He also loses his life in the accident, and now is with his parents. Billy is closing the door of his room as the real estate agent goes down the stairs. She turns to look at him, smiles, and walks away. The movie ends there.